June 12, 1942. A German U-boat surfaces off the coast of Long Island, New York. Four men in Nazi uniforms climb into a rubber raft and row toward the American shoreline. They carry enough explosives to cripple the United States war effort for 2 years. Their targets: the Hell Gate Bridge connecting New York, the city's water supply, critical railroad junctions, aluminum factories. They're Hitler's secret weapon, trained saboteurs sent to spread terror across America. But their leader, George John Dasch, is carrying an even more dangerous secret. Within 48 hours, he will walk into FBI headquarters and betray the entire operation. This is the true story of the Nazi saboteur who switched sides, exposed Hitler's plot, and then spent the rest of his life being hated by both countries. His betrayal saved thousands of American lives, and for that, he was called a traitor. Welcome to Forgotten History Archives. Wait to understand why George Dasch betrayed Nazi Germany. We need to understand who he really was, and it's not what you'd expect. George John Dasch was born in Germany in 1903, but by 1922, at just 19, he'd had enough of post-World War I poverty and chaos. He stowed away on a freighter headed to America, arriving in New York with nothing but ambition. For the next 17 years, Dasch lived the American dream, or at least his version of it. He worked as a waiter in New York restaurants. He even joined the U.S. Army briefly. He married an American woman from Pennsylvania. He learned to speak perfect, unaccented English by every measure that mattered. George Dasch had become American. But in 1939, with war looming in Europe, Dasch made a fateful decision. Homesick and struggling financially, he returned to Germany, just months before Hitler invaded Poland and started World War II. The timing couldn't have been worse. Dasch found himself trapped in Nazi Germany, unable to return to his wife in America, unable to escape the war machine consuming Europe. In 1941, a man named Walter Kappe came calling. Kappe was a German intelligence officer who had himself lived in Chicago and New York during the 1930s. He was recruiting for something special, Operation Pastorius, named after the founder of the first German settlement in America. The mission? Send trained saboteurs back to the United States to destroy critical infrastructure and spread terror. Kappe needed men who knew America intimately, men who spoke perfect English, men who could blend in seamlessly with American society. George Dasch was perfect for the job, but what Kappe didn't know was that Dasch had already made a decision, one that would doom the entire operation before it even began. At a training facility called Quentz Lake, outside Berlin, 8 men prepared for one of the most ambitious sabotage operations of World War II. Along with Dasch, there was Ernst Peter Berger, another German who had become a U.S. citizen. There were 6 others, all longtime U.S. residents who had returned to Germany before the war. For months, they trained in sabotage techniques, how to build bombs from common materials, how to identify weak points in bridges and factories, how to blend in with American crowds. They rehearsed their fake identities until every detail was perfect. The training manual even included a chilling protocol. If any saboteur showed signs of wanting to defect, the others were ordered to kill him without compunction. Their targets were chosen for maximum psychological and economic impact. The Hell Gate Bridge in New York, carrying 4 vital rail arteries across the Northeast. The Horseshoe Curve in Pennsylvania, a critical railroad junction. Aluminum factories in Philadelphia and Tennessee, essential for aircraft production. Canal locks in St. Louis and Cincinnati. The heart of commerce on the Mississippi, and perhaps most terrifying, New York City's water supply system. The German government gave them over $84,000 in cash, equivalent to more than $1.5 million today, enough to finance 2 years of sabotage operations. On May 26, 1942, the operation began. 4 men, including Dasch, boarded U-202 at Lorient, France. 2 days later, 4 more boarded U-201. Their destination, the American mainland. As the submarines descended into the dark Atlantic, Dasch pulled aside Ernst Berger, his most trusted companion, and told him something that should have gotten him killed on the spot. "I'm going to turn us in to the FBI." Berger was stunned. Dasch gave him two choices: join him or die. There were no other options. For 2 weeks, as the U-boats crossed the Atlantic, Dasch and Berger kept their secret. The other 6 saboteurs had no idea their mission was already compromised. Not by Allied intelligence, not by brilliant FBI work, but by the betrayal of their own leader. Hours after the landing, a call reached the FBI. A calm voice said, "I have important information. A German submarine has just landed on Long Island. I'll be in Washington within the week to deliver it personally to J. Edgar Hoover." Then the line went dead. The Bureau dismissed it. They got calls like that every day. Paranoid citizens, war hysteria, ghost stories of Nazi spies. But then, the Coast Guard found buried uniforms, explosives, fresh footprints in the sand. Suddenly, that anonymous call didn't sound so crazy. Within hours, the FBI realized German saboteurs were in America. But who were they? And where were they hiding? Meanwhile, George Dasch, the man who made the call, was panicking. He'd told one teammate, Ernest Berger, about his plan to defect. The others didn't know. And if they found out, he'd be dead before morning. On June 14th, just 2 days after landing, Dasch boarded a train to Washington, D.C. He checked into the Mayflower Hotel, room 351, and called the FBI headquarters. "I'm the man who called your New York office," he said. "I need to speak with J. Edgar Hoover." Hoover didn't answer. Instead, 2 FBI agents arrived at his door. What followed was one of the most astonishing debriefings in FBI history. For 2 days, Dasch told them everything: the training in Germany, the other team that had landed in Florida, the targets, the plans, the code names. Then he opened his briefcase and spilled $82,000 in cash onto the bed. The entire budget for Operation Pastorius. Within 14 days, all 8 saboteurs were captured. Not one bomb was planted. Not one life was lost. The entire Nazi operation, undone by one man's betrayal. On July 4th, 1942, headlines screamed, "Nazi saboteurs face stern army justice." The FBI was hailed as heroes. J. Edgar Hoover took the credit, but the truth? The FBI's biggest wartime victory had walked right into their hands. President Franklin Roosevelt ordered a military tribunal, the first since Lincoln's assassination. 8 men stood trial for espionage and sabotage. Each pleaded not guilty, claiming they'd only joined the mission to find their way back to their families in America. But in court, Dasch's betrayal was barely mentioned. The prosecution wanted heroes, not moral complexity. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: death by electric chair. Dasch was crushed. He had surrendered, confessed, and stopped a national disaster. Yet now he faced the same fate as the men he betrayed. Behind the scenes, Attorney General Francis Biddle pleaded for mercy. Even Hoover quietly agreed. Roosevelt listened. Dasch's death sentence became 30 years. Berger received life. The other 6 were executed on August 8, 1942. Each death took 14 minutes. The electric chair was new to Washington, and they feared power surges. Dasch served 6 years in prison. By 1948, he was offered release if he agreed to deportation. He returned to Germany, but not as a hero. To Germans, he was a traitor, the man who had doomed his comrades. When locals discovered who he was, mobs gathered. He fled in the night to save his life. In 1959, he wrote a book, 8 Spies Against America. Almost nobody read it. He spent the rest of his life in obscurity, running small shops, changing towns when his past caught up. He begged to return to the United States. Every time, Hoover blocked it. George John Dasch died in 1992. He was 89 years old. He never saw America again. So who was George Dasch? A hero or a traitor? To America, useful but uncomfortable. A Nazi who defected. A spy who saved lives. To Germany, unforgivable. The man whose betrayal sent 6 comrades to the chair. But if Dasch had stayed loyal, Operation Pastorius might have worked. Bridges destroyed, factories burned, water poisoned. Hundreds, maybe thousands, dead. All prevented by one man's decision to change his mind. His story didn't fit the narrative. Heroes aren't supposed to start as villains.